5th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. I will now call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Comments of public interest. This portion of the meeting is to allow up to 3 minutes per speaker with 30 total minutes on items of interest or concern and not on items that are on the current agenda. The Planning and Zoning Commission may not discuss these items, but may respond with factual or policy information. The Planning and Zoning Commission may choose to place the item on a future agenda.
Are there any speaker cards for this item?
No, we do not. Consent agenda. The consent agenda will be acted upon in one motion and contains items which are routine and typically non-controversial. Items may be removed from this agenda for individual discussion by commissioners, staff, or any citizen. The presiding officer will establish time limits based upon the number of speaker requests. Vice Chair Downs, a citizen is requesting to pull consent agenda item K.
Thank you. Is there any commissioner who would like to pull a different item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve with the exception of item K.
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda with the exception of item K.
I have a motion by Commissioner Horn. Do I have a second? Second. Commissioner Gibbons, second. Please vote. Why do we have Commissioner Beach listed and Horn? Maybe the seats are off.
Are the seats off?
And we have Munns. And do we want to try this again? All right, we're going to reset this vote. All right. Yeah. Tell you what, we're going to do a hand vote on this item, and then she can work on fixing it for the next. So we have a motion by Commissioner Horn to approve the consent agenda and a second by Commissioner Gibbons. All in favor, raise your hand. And that carries 7-0. Let's go to item K.
Item K is a revised site plan, Southside 14th Street Addition, Block A, Lot 1, Restaurant Multifamily Residence, Professional General Administrative Office, and Health Fitness Center on one lot on 0.3 acre located on the south side of the 14th Street, 125 feet east of Avenue K. Zone Downtown Business Government Project, RSP 2021-012. Applicant is Eastside 14th Street, LLC.
Thank you. We have Mr. Lyle had requested this be pulled. Is he on the line? Okay, Mr. Lyle, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. Mr. Downs, Ms. Day, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I sent some notes in earlier today. Mr. Downs, do you know if you had a chance to review those or the commissioners?
We all received them, yes.
Okay. Just to briefly go over those, this site plan was approved, I believe, in 2018. Ms. Day told me that originally multifamily was contemplated as a use here, but when the site plan came in, it didn't have multifamily listed. Ms. Day also told me that the plans that were submitted to the building inspection department for construction did not match the plans that, or the use that was submitted to the planning department. Now we have a project that is largely built out, and we have the applicant coming back and adding multifamily to its use. As you all know, there's probably not a more controversial land use in our city. And so I wanted, I felt like this deserved more than a consent agenda approval. In a conversation that Ms. Day and I had, we talked about Eastside Village Phase 1 and 2, Murata, Southside, or Junction 15th, each of those having shared parking, but each of those have shared parking on their site. In other words, the ratio of parking that's required at each one of those sites is met on site, and then there's an excess of parking that the public is allowed to use. But the site that we're looking at tonight, the parking on site doesn't meet what's required, and opposite of these other sites, it's all off-site on a city lot that the city has paid to construct. Additionally, each one of those other apartment complexes, the residential or the multifamily use parking is separated by a gate or a motorized door from what is available for the general public. But because the development was not contemplated in the site plan process, that can't happen here. That hasn't been done here. And so the scenario that I wrote down was, it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, downtown Plano is hopping. We're a few more months down the road post-COVID, and somebody comes home. There's parking at the Municipal Center building. There's parking over along the DART track, but these people don't have any way to secure their parking and actually get into their unit because all of it
Mr. Lyle,
shared parking.
Yes. Can you wrap up? We're at the end of the 3 minutes. I just want to make sure you know.
Oh, sure. So I would just tell y'all that, I can't think of anything more unfathomable than building apartments and then coming back and looking for a rubber stamp. And I think I feel like hopefully y'all read through the points that I sent earlier. That's why I laid them out. So I'll just let y'all discuss from here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lyle.
Thank you.
All right, and I think we all received the presentation or the information that Mr. Lyle presented to us. There's some of the points in there, though, I think that are worth maybe getting a staff response to because it's maybe a little unclear. Ms. Day, if you want to touch on some of that.
Yeah, and there may be other speakers on this item as well that we want to hear, but I would be glad to address this. This is a site plan that did come into the city for approval and was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Multifamily residence is a use by right in the zoning district. So by bringing this use back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we did review the zoning district fully and have found the plan that's presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission to be in compliance with the zoning. So it is a use that's allowed by right. However, it is a requirement to have the uses listed on the site plan correctly in order to pull building permits. So this is an important issue that we get this corrected prior to a certificate of occupancy. So that's one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we get this corrected and so that the project can move forward for approval and for the certificate of occupancy.
Thank you. I guess we could entertain if there's someone that wants to speak and, to support this.
Nathan Shea, 1104 14th Street. I am the owner of the building that is in discussion here. I guess when we submitted the site plan, we were under the assumption that the multifamily was included. We had spoken with Christina as well as Eric. They basically gave us the requirements that we needed to meet the residential for that building. We followed all the requirements from fire sprinkler to getting all of our fire ratings to make that part of the residential. I originally owned the property that the city now has for the parking. It was I guess several years ago when we were granted the right to use the parking to build our building. In turn, I sold that property to the city and they're building the parking lot. We have plenty of parking available, obviously. Now with the multifamily, there's a different requirement. You're only required, I believe, 1.5 spaces per each 2-bedroom apartment. So that literally dropped our parking from the original, I think, 49 or 50 down to 11 less. So we have 11 less parking spaces required, as well as we do have 5 spaces on site. My mother is going to be using one of those parking spaces. She's 89 years old. She is going to be renting, or I will be renting that apartment for her on the 4th floor. So the parking is right there. So we do have spaces available for her and her sister, who is 88, who's going to be in the other apartment. So there are spaces up close that are part of the building itself, as well as the 11 extra spaces in the parking that was secured when we did this building.
Thank you. So they're still dealing with some IT issues, but I don't know if there's any commissioner that has a question about this. It sounds like this is a use by right. We have an administrative duty to review revised site plans and approve them, but I'm open to any comments or questions.
So is it accurate, Ms. Day, to say that this plan meets all the requirements of the city, the zoning, and everything else? It's just a matter of accurately showing the zoning types or the use types on the plan, and that's it?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Down, excuse me. We do have 2 additional speakers for this.
Oh, okay. None of that's on here, so.
No, it's okay. We have Warren Hilla.
I don't know if he's here. He's the engineer for us. And
Okay.
Cal is here, so he needs to speak.
Cal Young.
Okay.
My name's Cal Young, 3829 Ridgetop Lane, Plano. I'm the architect on the building, working with Nathan Shea. And I just want to point out, we worked extensively with Eric and his team, 2018, 2019, about the uses that would be allowed. And through working with them, we figured out that the 0.30 acres would require a minimum of 14 units if the project was ever converted to multifamily, which it does meet, and therefore we were allowed the use of multifamily. We wanted to call it loft living and have the option of the lease to either be a working space or a living space. And anyway, all these conversations were back 2018, 2019, and I think it was just a labeling issue that the residential wasn't clearly stated on the site plan, which we hope to get addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my apologies. These were cards submitted at the meeting, not on the list previously. So my apologies for not recognizing you earlier. Comments, questions, motion for approval, item K.
Well, I have a question back to springboarding on what Commissioner Gibbons was saying. Do we have adequate parking available for this multifamily? Yes or no?
It meets the requirements of the ordinance.
Then I make a motion that we approve item K. Second.
All right, so I have a motion to approve item K by Commissioner Horn and a second by Commissioner Gibbons. Do we have our IT working properly this time? Well, Commissioner Barbera is not here. And Commissioner Gary is not listed. And neither is Commissioner Walters. So can I have a hand vote for approval on item K? That passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So before we begin this, just because there's a slight change to our process, in the past we've presented item 1A, had all the discussion, speaker cards, everything around that, and then we would have a separate presentation for item 1B, and generally those two overlap so much. In the past, we've worked where we presented items 1A and 1B at the same time, so that we basically had the whole discussion. We will have separate votes on them, but the presentation at this point will be to present item 1A and 1B together, and then we will move forward from that point. So, Ms. Bridges, if you want to read items 1A and 1B for us, please.
Agenda item number 1A, public hearing zoning case 2021-003, request to rezone 19.1 acres located at the southwest corner of Plano Parkway and Executive Drive from corridor commercial to planned development corridor commercial to allow multifamily residents as a permitted use and to modify development standards, which may include but are not limited to the location and size of multifamily use, building setbacks, maximum floor area ratio, open space, landscape requirements, building design, parking, and other development standards. Zone corridor commercial and located within the 190 Tollway Plano Parkway Overlay District. Applicant is Onlop Property Owner, LLC, care of Bay West Development. Agenda item 1B is concept plan, Fry's Electronic Edition, Block A, lots 1 through 3, and Block B, lot 1. Mid-rise residential, professional, general, administrative office, and hotel on 4 lots on 16.5 acres located at the southwest corner of Plano Parkway and Executive Drive. Zone corridor commercial and located within the 190 Tollway Plano Parkway Overlay District. Applicant again is Onlop Property Owner, LLC, care of Bay West Development.
Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. I'm Ann Bagley, and I am a consulting planner working with the Planning Department on zoning cases submitted under the Interim Comprehensive Plan. The request you have before you is to go back one slide. Back a slide. Okay. The request you have before you is to zone 19.1 acres located at the southwest corner of Plano Parkway and Executive Drive from corridor commercial to planned development corridor commercial to allow multifamily residents as a permitted use and to modify development standards. Next slide. The property is located at 700 East Plano Parkway near the intersection of US 75 and President George Bush Turnpike. The subject property was previously a Fry's Electronics store. The property to the north across Plano Parkway is zoned corridor commercial, CC, and is developed with professional, general administrative offices, a religious facility, and retail uses. The property to the east across Executive Drive is zoned planned development 491, corridor commercial, and is developed with multifamily residences. The property to the south is the President George Bush Turnpike and properties located in the city of Richardson, which are developed as multifamily residents, and the City Line Bush DART station. On the west are 2 office buildings with their associated parking. Next slide, please. This concept plan shows the proposed residential units on the north side wrapping around to the east. The area in the center is for office uses, and a potential hotel is to be located south of Executive Drive. Next slide, please. The comprehensive plan review looks at several elements of the comprehensive plan for conformance. The land use element designates the subject property as freeway commercial. Freeway commercial is a category intended to define the unique character of the US 75 corridor. This corridor includes major retail development along with general commercial, entertainment, lodging, and office uses. The proposed development is not in conformance with this part of the comprehensive plan, as residential uses are not included in the definition. Next slide, please. Section 2.5, the 2012 Interim Amendment in Redevelopment and Undeveloped Land Policies. The project does not establish complete neighborhood, and that's what's required to prevent isolated residential development. A complete neighborhood is where there are a number of uses, including residential, schools, stores, and parks. Most of the site, as you discussed earlier, Policy 3 states that the site is within, should not be within 1,200 feet of the two expressways. However, the majority of this site is in that 1,200-foot setback. Only a small portion of the western building is outside of the 200 feet outside the 1,200-foot setback from the bush, and a small portion of the eastern building is not in the setback from US 75. However, so it does not, it's not within the it's not in conformance with the 1,200-foot required setback. However, the proposed development does meet and exceed the minimum density requirement of 40 units per acre. They were going to have approximately 75.7 units per acre with a maximum potential of 100 units per acre. Next slide, please. The housing density policy statement. There's policy 3 that recommends a 1,500-foot separation between developments of 500 units or more, so that no more than 500 units are located within any one complex or group of complexes. Executive Drive's 60-foot right-of-way does not provide the separation from the 833 lots in the proposed development to the multifamily across Executive Drive in Oro Plano addition. So this proposed development does not conform to the 1,500-foot external separation. Next slide, please. The infill housing statement provides the objective to provide a variety of housing options for prospective Plano residents. The proposed development appears to be providing a similar product to the existing multifamily development to the east across Executive Drive, not really adding variety. And there's this statement. Potential development of a property is currently zoned. A property should not be rezoned to provide for residential development simply because a developer may be interested in it for that purpose. Alternative neighborhoods. Alternative neighborhoods are residential developments that do not fit into a typical neighborhood pattern. They are generally considered inappropriate along the major freeways. When consideration is given to mixed-use proposals that will integrate residential and non-residential uses into a pedestrian-oriented environment, this proposed development is essentially a residential development and not mixed-use. Located in the high-visibility intersection of US 75 and President George Bush Turnpike, the proposed development does not meet the criteria for an alternative neighborhood. However, under the alternative neighborhood, the project does meet the requirement to be adjacent to a type E or larger street, as this meets the requirement of Plano Parkway being a type C thoroughfare. Next slide, please. The economic development element recognizes the need for preservation of land for future economic development opportunities. This is one of the 3 critical issues facing the city when the plan was developed. That's the basis for ensuring that the remaining undeveloped land is used to support long-term economic viability, including the preservation of major corridors and business parks for economic development. The site is currently an unoccupied big box store with a large parking lot that will be demolished for the proposed development. This essentially makes it undeveloped land or a greenfield, and the conversion of a large portion of the tract to residential would not be supported by the economic development criteria of the interim comprehensive plan. The site is where two major expressways come together. There's excellent access from Plano Parkway and the service roads of both the expressways and Executive Drive. The site is within the vicinity of Bush Dart Station. Two office buildings are on the site now, and although the big box retailer has left the site, it's conceivable that due to its high visibility, size, and layout, other office buildings and commercial development could locate successfully on the site. Next slide, please. The issues that were discussed involved in this project are although there's residential development to the east, the request essentially places 883 residential units on the edge of commercial property in proximity to US 75 and Bush Turnpike. Additionally, the surrounding zoning to the north, west, and south sides are all commercial corridor, which allow many uses that may be incompatible with residential living. There are 2,964 multifamily units in the general area yet to be built, with Collin Creek Mall and Heritage Creekside. The proposed development is north of the City Line Dart Station in Richardson. To walk to the station, there are existing sidewalks and/or the trail adjacent to the line, and is a distance of approximately a half a mile. Next slide, please. The plan development standards proposed by the applicant are intended to support residential development and potential future non-residential development detailed in the staff report. Overall, the PG district is designed to include a number of mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented development standards. It does not meet the city standards for mixed-use development of the zoning ordinance or this interim comprehensive plan. The recommendation is denial. That's the end of my presentation on 1A.
Thank you. Proceed to 1B.
Would you like me to read that again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed on these. There were no objections within the 200 feet to this proposal. Next slide. There were 4 received by email that opposed the project. I think this is the applicant's.
Okay, we want to move on to. Does she want to present 1B? Yes, can you go ahead and present on 1B as well?
Yes. Get on next page. Agenda item 1B is a slide. The slide shows. The slide shows that the current zoning is in the commercial corridor. Next slide. This concept plan, its purpose is to show the locations of the proposed hotel, mid-rise residential, and professional and general office development. The concept plan is also recommended for denial. Now, this really does conclude my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions, and you also have Ms. Day and Mr. Hill available.
Okay, before we move on to the applicant, are there technical questions related to 1A or 1B for staff? Seeing none, we will move on to the applicant's presentation.
We have Brian Wolf online.
Good evening, Commissioners. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes. Yep. Great. Sorry I couldn't be there tonight in person. My name is Brian Wolf at 90 Railway Avenue. I'm a partner at Bay West Development, and we're the owners and applicants for this project. I'd like to start out by thanking staff for their hard work on this project to date. It's been a long process to get to this point, and we're excited to present it to you. We started talking to Eric Hill and staff well over a year ago on this property. It's been a bit of a moving goalpost for us as we first started putting together plans based on the Plano Tomorrow plan. We've obviously since reverted back to the interim comp plan. While features have pushed and pulled throughout the process, I think the overall vision has remained the same. Our goal has been to create a vibrant economic district here adjacent to the DART station. City Line has done a great job creating a very walkable live-work district on the other side of the turnpike, and we'd like to draft off that success and do the same here in East Plano. We're flanked by apartments on one side of our property and an older office building on the other. We really wanted to integrate these two uses and create a center point for this part of town, while drastically increasing the quality level of what we were offering to be able to attract the highest quality tenant base. We spent the past couple weeks significantly increasing our development standards to ensure Plano gets the highest quality building materials on all product types. As I'm sure you're all aware, attracting high quality office tenants has gotten more and more difficult. Their access to high quality housing and walkability has become absolutely vital. The Class A housing we're requesting here will allow us to attract those high wage office tenants who have otherwise, unfortunately, crossed this location off their list in its current state. We've also added a hotel component to take advantage of the future DART Silver Line, as well as to service our future office tenants. We believe with the current mix of uses we are proposing, we can create a TOD center in this area of town where commerce can start to thrive. I'll pass the presentation along to Bill and Brian now, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you. By the way, the public hearing is open. Thank you.
Next, we have Bill Dahlstrom.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and Commission, Bill Dahlstrom, 2323 Ross Avenue. Appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you. This is a difficult site. If we could have the presentation. Next slide, please. You saw our site plan, again, with the two multifamily buildings, the office building and the hotel. We have a central spine through the development. It does provide walkability within the development, and we have open spaces scattered throughout. But I'm going to let Brian Moore from GFF talk more about the design. Next slide, please. Again, we're asking for a planned development to adjust some of the CC standards and to allow. We're asking for a mid-rise residential. We're not asking for multifamily as stated in the staff report. Next slide, please. Again, the request, track 1, mid-rise residential, hotel on track 2 with a modified setback. That's the only request on track 2. And then you heard some of these other modifications we're requesting. Next slide, please. Again, I think this is, it's a real opportunity to capture the opportunity of the site and to make it more of a traditional oriented transit-oriented development. As we have stated previously, we were hoping that we'd get the same accommodation of support that staff in the P&Z gave to the adjacent property across the street from us. We think there are benefits to the city, fewer cars on the road, increased access to dining. You'd have direct access on the rail up to downtown. Next slide, please. And there is no other site in Plano with this opportunity. We have a site that has the opportunity to get access to 3 rail lines. No place else in Plano has the ability to go east-west on rail. And when you look at the DART map, we're adjacent or near the silver line. The silver line, obviously, you know, is going to be an east-west line. We've got the red and the orange north-south. So this is a unique location. There is no other location like this in the city. Next slide. And this is a blow-up of that same exhibit showing the location of the silver, orange, and red. Again, totally unique in the city. Nobody else will have this opportunity. Next slide, please. I'm going to let Brian Moore talk in a few minutes about more of the design issues, but I wanted to capture some of the comments that were made in the staff report. I've done a lot of work out here. I was extremely disappointed in the staff report and how negative it was against our application. I believe there were some things that were left out of the application from the comp plan that I think supports our request, and I'd like to review a few of those. I'm not going to go through each and every one point because I don't have that much time here. It's going to take a long time. In the report, I'm going to just start going through the land use element. The land use element, yeah, we recognize that it's got the FC designation, but this is from a 2011 plan, a 10-year-old plan. And one of the elements of the plan is the corridor and what's happening in the corridor, and it cites Collin Creek Mall. But Collin Creek Mall, as we all know, has transformed. This whole area is transforming. Nothing stays static. This is a very dynamic part of the city, and it is changing. We recognize it's changing. And obviously, as is stated in the comprehensive plan also, it's a guide for future development. It's not the law. It's not zoning. Next slide. Sorry. You can leave that slide there for Brian. We'll let Brian talk about the walkability. Under the 2012 interim amendment, redevelopment undeveloped land policies, the first policy is no negative impact. There's nothing presented about our proposed development having a negative impact on public safety, infrastructure, school capacity, access, availability of amenities and services. Nothing presented as far as a negative impact at all. Policy 2 talked about isolated residential development should not be permitted. Well, we really see this as an extension of what's across the street. It's a high quality development across the street. It's doing extremely well. I talked to the developer today, and he tells me that the occupancy rates are in the mid-90s. Further in that policy, which was not really emphasized, it states that mid-rise residential development, this is the policy in the report, mid-rise residential development and special needs housing, which we're not, could be an exception if the surrounding land use is compatible. The surrounding land uses are to the east, again, residential. To the south, we have the DART station, the city line. To the north, we have office, religious uses, retail. And to the west, we have the current land uses are offices. Those are all compatible with multifamily. Going on to policy 3 that we talked about, the 1,200-foot setback, we need to take into consideration the existing development patterns. Well, the development patterns in this area, when you take a look at the development patterns, you have multifamily across the street. You have multifamily on the south side of 190. This is an area that again, it's an opportunity to build on the residential that's there and to build a residential mass that will bring in the businesses. And again, the policy states mid-rise residential could be an option if the surrounding land uses are compatible. With regard to the housing density policy, again, something was left out of the staff report that I think is critical in this discussion. It does talk about the 500-foot units. It talks about the 1,500-foot separation. But what's missing in the staff report is the next comment as far as locating medium and high-density housing throughout the community based on access to major thoroughfares and mass transit opportunities. Let's face it, there are very few of those opportunities in the city. This is one. With regard to the infill housing policy, there was a statement in the report that says, provide a variety of housing options for prospective Plano residents. Again, something that was not in the report that I believe should have been and is directly supportive of our cases. Objective C2 under infill housing policy, create new housing opportunities. Create new housing opportunities that complement and support existing residential development. That's what we're proposing. With regard to the policy statement for infill housing, the statement that a property should not be rezoned to provide for residential development simply because the developer may be interested in it for that purpose. I think, as Mr. Wolf stated, they've looked at it. They do many different types of development. This is the development that they see, they believe is appropriate. And the other developments, again, the market is very tough on offices and retail right now. With regard to alternative neighborhoods, the objective is ensure that alternative neighborhood formats provide functional and appropriate environments for residential uses and activities, and it states in the report that the analysis uses several factors, unit count. And in the report, when it refers to unit count, it states that we need to make sure that what's being provided is economically feasible. What we're providing is economically feasible. The next issue is relationship to surrounding land uses. Well, again, our proposed development relates directly to what's across the street and to the DART station. Potential development as currently zoned, we heard Mr. Wolf already address that, and special need housing, which we are not proposing. So with regard to the alternative neighborhood policies and objectives, we believe we satisfy those. As I stated, the proposed development meets the requirement as planned with regard to separation by type E. With regard to alternative neighborhood not being appropriate along highways, the last statement in that policy states consideration may be given to mixed-use proposals that integrate residential and non-residential uses into a pedestrian-oriented environment. And I suggest that we don't look at just the individual tract of land, but we look at what's happening around us. And this is an opportunity to promote development around us with other types of uses. Speaking of economic development, I'm going to try to go as fast as I can, Mr. Chair, because I have Mr. Moore who wants to speak. Okay, well,
you have 5 minutes left.
Let me just finish on a couple of notes, because we talked about economic development. This is something that is very important to me from what I do for a living. The code talks about preserving opportunities, preserving major corridors and business parks for economic development. It talks about, trying to promote economic development. Well, I'll tell you, I'll submit to you that residential is economic development. If you look just across the highway from what's happened in Richardson with City Line, what happened in City Line was the result of the multifamily that was able to go there. If you look at what's happened at Legacy Central, that residential helped bring in some of those businesses to that development. It's happening everywhere. Residential is part of economic development. And these policies in the conference plan don't say residential is prohibited or not permitted. It says you need to take a look at it as a part of, in order to not jeopardize, I think is the phrase, the economic development opportunities. But residential is an element of economic development. At that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Moore to go over some of these design issues in more detail. One issue that I did want to talk about in the conditions, we asked for parking ratios, and I think it was referenced that those were downtown parking ratios. Those are in fact parking ratios for mid-rise residential in the city zoning ordinance. So we're not asking for any variances there. We're asking for what's provided for in the zoning ordinance. Brian, would you like to come down and talk about the design? Thank you very much.
Mr. Moore, you have 3 minutes.
How many?
3.
3 minutes. Thank you. Mr. Downs, members of the commission, good evening. My name is Brian Moore, 2808 Fairmount Street in Dallas. Really pleased to be presenting this project to you this evening. Let's go ahead and go to the previous slide real quick. Two things that we really wanted to do as part of our collective vision on this property was to transform the existing land use to become a true neighborhood-oriented development. This is going to be a true neighborhood-oriented development. And then secondly, to be able to transform and to create a true sense of place on this property with a combination of different uses of office development, multifamily, hotel, commercial, retail, restaurant uses. This will be a mixed-use development. So we believe that this is exactly the kind of thing for this particular piece of property. As you can see, this ribeye-shaped piece of property is, in fact, actually only 8 minutes walking distance away. It's not 2,500 feet, as staff report says. It is around 2,000 feet. I did a double check just to make sure. That's roughly 8-minute walk. So it is actually very, very pedestrian-oriented and very pedestrian-friendly. Next slide, please. This just shows a different example of how that might look on the 8-minute walk. Next slide, please. We showed a sampling of different photos that that call attention to what that 8-minute walk might end up looking like, literally from the subject property to the platform station of the DART rail station that Bill and Brian have already spoken to. The subject property is on the immediate right, with the multifamily development by Trinsic on the immediate left. Next slide, please. You're skirting past the multifamily development there on the right, and then taking an immediate right, or in this particular case, a left. So next slide, please. This is looking at the along the frontage road where you're looking from, where you came from, and you're literally going to turn around and cross the service road. Next slide, please. And you'll see right there, you'll see the tracks over there on the left. You'll cross the service road, and the sidewalk there in the middle is literally a straight shot right to the DART rail station. So it is very pedestrian friendly, very pedestrian oriented. Next slide, please. We wanted to close with a sampling of 3 different images for you, if we can. The big idea for all of this has to do with promoting a sense of place and transforming the existing use from big box retail to something that is far more transformative. In this particular case, we have a north-south drive where we have a park space close to the middle of the property, about half an acre in size, with a node of development there at the far south, in this particular case, office development with multifamily on either end. Next slide, please. On this particular slide, we're looking to the north with the park space in the foreground and looking from the office space. In this particular case, what we're really trying to do is to promote a true sense of place with vibrant activity. Next slide, please. And in this one, with the ground floor highly activated uses on the ground floor of the office development to the right, with commercial activity that would spill over into the park space with vibrant and interactive park spaces that would be part of not just for this particular neighborhood in this community, but also for the greater community at large. And we'll close it with that. Thank you, Mr. Downs.
Thank you. Do we have other speakers on this item?
There are no additional speakers.
Seeing so, we'll close the public hearing on these items and confine discussion to council. Thoughts, questions, comments? Commissioner Gary.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for bringing this in and presenting it. I think you make some compelling points here in favor of your project. I have a couple questions. You mentioned it's a Class A housing development. Can you define that for me, please?
Mr. Wolf still on? Sorry, sir. Brian Wolf.
Hi, yep. Hopefully you all can hear me. Class A, we have applied an increased standard in our PD stipulations related to material usage on the outside of the space. I believe it's 80% needs to be of glass or brick or other natural stones. We wanted to set a standard higher than what was the standard across the street and what is typically the standard under mid-rise residential in the city of Plano. So we increased those development standards to hopefully get the city of Plano comfortable that the product type that we build is first-class residential product.
Significant availability of apartments in this area, especially just to the south. Can you give us any insight into any market study you've done and what you think the feasibility of these units? I think it's what, 883 is the number. What's the feasibility look like in terms of occupancy?
Yeah, we have done a market study for this site. I know there was a market study associated with our staff report from 2018. We had an updated study done last year. Our study showed on a supply-demand perspective that East Plano in our competitive market area over the next 5 years is going to be undersupplied by 3,400 units over the next 4 years. We think, obviously with the increased demand that North Texas has been getting in general, this area being a TOD location is a perfect place to incorporate some of that demand. That demand does take into account other projects within this area, including the Collin Creek Mall.
Okay, thanks. And one final question on this for now. You present the office as part of your offer here.
What kind of timing do you have for your office space, and what kind of demand do you expect for that?
Yeah, so what I was trying to state in the beginning is we need to be able to create a different vibrancy north of the Turnpike here to be able to attract a tenant that would fit into that office building. We've been in contact with brokers and been in the market to date to try to get some office demand associated with the site as is today, and there is none. And so that's kind of what kicked off this process. Again, started a little bit over a year ago about how do we really create something special that can attract an office tenant to this location. And so from a phasing perspective, we are proposing being allowed to build one of our phases of multifamily mid-rise residential to start, to be able to prove out our concept and create the there in this location. And then after that, only be able to pull permits on our future phases in conjunction with being able to pull permits on non-residential space.
Okay, thank you.
I've been by this site numerous times back when Fry's was active, and I went by it again today, and I saw the new apartment complexes that were located there. One of the things that was striking to me is that it's not a residential neighborhood. There is no grocery store in walking distance. There isn't. There's no dry cleaning. There's no pharmacy. Down the street, there's a liquor store. And across the street, you're going to see a church or a makeshift church. You're going to see various office places. The only closest place to eat is Love and War in Texas. The way this is presented to me now, I gotta be honest with you, I'd have to vote no on this plan. But I'm hesitant because I think there's opportunity here if we looked at something that was an urban mixed-use type of development where there's retail on the first floor that would be able to supply and support the residents that live not only in this complex, but also support the people that are going to be in your office, also going to be in the hotel, and also the neighbors across the street. But as it stands now, I just don't see any reason to grant this change in zoning.
Thank you. Commissioner Stone?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Moore, got a couple of questions for you, if you would. Could we back up on the slides that Mr. Moore presented back to the one that looks at the open space in a concept open space?
You're referring to the renderings?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was 2 or 3 from the end. There, that one. I like what I see in this rendering, in this presentation, but I don't see a space like that anywhere in your project. It's a little disingenuous, my view, to show us this, which clearly has several hundred feet of clear space.
Yeah.
And in reality, you've got 2 building blocks here which have 400 foot or more linear walls fronting the street, 30 feet back. What you presented and what you're showing us here just doesn't match. I'm sorry.
I understand your anxiety about that. The space that we're showing there on the screen at the moment is the central park space. It's not along the perimeter, so it's immediately in front of or to the north of the office space, which is showing up very clearly on the site plan rendering. The distance from edge of building to edge of pavement, which you can see in the kind of the upper left center portion, that's roughly 60 feet in length. The length of the building itself is around 210 feet or so in length. The total length of that park space that you're looking at, basically from the distance to the foreground, is roughly around half an acre in size by the time it's all said and done. And I'm not including any of the articulated and textured roadways or the fire lane immediately on the center portion. So it is very accurately depicted, but it may be possibly what you're looking at on the site plan rendering is not exactly the location as it relates to this. So this is specifically in the lower center portion of the overall site plan.
Okay, good, thank you. Another comment.
Would you like us to put up the site plan also?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
The walking distance and going to the DART station.
Yes, sir.
Do I have to walk across the service road for the bush?
Of course. Yes, sir.
Do you anticipate having a signal light there?
Well, there certainly could be.
I can tell you that stretch they're going 50 or 60 miles an hour on the service road because I've driven it. It's very fast.
60 miles an hour?
Yes. It's hard to get in and out. Yeah. So I just wondered, have you had any discussions with the highway department about crossing?
We have not, and in fact, I believe our traffic engineer also has not had specific conversations as it relates to signalized crosswalks or illuminated crosswalks of some sort. It's certainly something that would be additive to the safety factor as it relates to crossing the service road. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Personally, I don't have any issue with apartments per se on this site. I do have an issue with 850 some odd and 1,400 or more cars that you're going to park. My personal view is you've paved over and built almost every foot you can. I'd like to see the project shrink and not have 5-story buildings on the street front, but start with some lower structures and grow toward the middle. I wouldn't have any problem with a high-rise for apartment living. Yeah. If the benefits could then be, it would be a pyramid kind of design.
Yeah, stair-step.
Personally, that's my view. Lastly, if you're successful on this, I would ask you to consider putting a sky bridge from the parking garage over to your office building, so that the people that park up on 4 and 5 don't have to go all the way to 1 to get to work.
True.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stone. Anyone else? Commissioner Samara.
I was struck with your characterization of the other 3 segments of this intersection. The City Line project, which has been an enormous success, is directly across the freeway, Bush Freeway, from your proposed development. City Line was built because State Farm needed a place to locate their regional offices. And after they built one tall building, they built a second, and then Raytheon joined them. They had 2,900 apartments, I believe, planned for the City Line Center. They didn't get them all built. Instead, even this week, they announced more luxury townhomes associated with the City Line project. What we're seeing with this corner, all 4 segments of this corner, is a very, very important piece of land for Plano. We're often told that Plano is left with 5% of its developable land. I wouldn't assume that this was part of the developable or undevelopable land, since it had the Fry's location on it. Now we have what's really is a premium location in our city, a gateway location in our city, a location that looks like the Galleria at the intersection of 2 major arteries. So as far as best use being 833 multifamily apartments as small as 600 square feet, this doesn't look to me to be the best use of a very important and very valuable piece of property for Plano. I was also struck by your statement that that office and retail is tough right now. All we've heard from development staff is that there is a backlog of companies that are making inquiries about moving to North Texas, and especially from San Francisco. So this valuable piece of land could easily be the headquarters site for a company moving to Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's a very premium site. So I have a lot of trouble with devoting this site to residential, to multifamily residential. And those are my feelings on it, the way our city's growing.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibbon?
Well, I'm in the business of helping companies move or renew their lease in office buildings. That's what I do every day. More than 10 years ago, the building that's immediately to the west of this subject site, I had a client come to me and say, I want to be in Plano, but I have to be able to walk to the Dart Light Rail or I won't be there. There was one building in Plano that could accommodate that, and that's the 500 North Central building. And I asked him why. He says, because I live in Deep Ellum and I'm not driving to Plano, but I'll sit there and read while I do it. So I think there is a huge opportunity here for office, but not any time in the near future. There is no demand for office space right now, pretty much anywhere in the country, but certainly not in Dallas-Fort Worth. There's about 20% vacancy rate in office buildings. So regardless of how many companies from California or any other place decide to move here, we have way too much space. I mean, we're talking 80 million square feet of vacant office space right now. 9 million of that, 10 million of that just being sublease. So for us to sit here and say that, you know, this is a great office site, I don't disagree with you if there were demand, but that demand is not coming anytime soon. I would predict 5 years at the earliest before we really see any significant demand for office space. That's not to say, however, that there won't be something new built. Somebody comes along and says, I want a special use building built for myself, then maybe that's a possibility. I actually toured a building last week where that owner said, we're about to break ground in a new building in Coppell. So there will be isolated incidences of that, but in the aggregate, demand is dead for quite a long time. Having said all that about office space, the question is whether or not this is an appropriate use for mid-rise residential. I personally think that in the presentation here, there has been lots of good arguments on both sides of the fence. I agree with the presentation by the developers saying that there's a lot of reasons why this does meet policy. And I also understand from the staff's presentation why they think it does not. I think this is part of an overall neighborhood. You got to look at what's beyond the bounds of this individual piece of property. And so when you say that there's no grocery store within walking distance, you know what? There's no grocery store within walking distance of my house in Plano. So I don't think that is a criteria that makes any sense for whether or not we approve something. You know, can we drive to it? Sure. There's the Whole Foods right across the highway at City Line. There's other things right up the street. So is it within a reasonable distance of that? Absolutely. You know, I think there's a huge demand for people that want to be transit oriented. And I think this is one of the last places where we can do that. So all things considered, I support this development. Is it perfect? No. Do I wish that the office could be built immediately? Yes. I know better than that. Would I like there to be a lot of walkable retail that goes along with it? Yes, but that's not reality these days. So I support it, even though it's not perfect, and I appreciate it.
Anybody else want to make a comment?
But there's just not an opportunity right now for office development. The residential feel here just isn't right. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a neighborhood to me. I'm not sure that I think the studies that the city has done, planning department has done with respect to residential. I'm in favor, I think, of what they're saying, that there's enough there currently or will be over the next couple of years based upon what's planned. But the thing this feels like could be a tremendous gateway into our city. And, you know, I don't know. I could look at that. I'm just making things up now. Whether this becomes a large civic center that's got retail commercial space around it or something of that nature that has a draw of its own that complements the whole quadrant. So I would not be in favor of this at this time.
Thank you all for your input. Oh, Commissioner Gary.
Yeah, I had a couple questions earlier. I'd just like to make a couple comments. I do think you made some compelling points for this. I have to agree with whoever said it. Having been around this site some, I think the pedestrian aspect of getting to the rail across the service road, I think would be dangerous, quite frankly. I think you could make a case where there's a lot of positives to this, but I also, with all the apartments still coming yet to be built, and with the opportunity to possibly do something that might be more economically beneficial for Plano, I think I see challenges in the site right now from a multi-housing perspective.
Okay, my 2 cents. Residential demand is like off the charts. That's why houses get 35 offers on them, and the apartment rental rates are at 95%. Office demand is drops considerably, and we still don't know what the shakeout of that's going to be from this last year. The firm I work for is reshuffling its entire deal, and 80% of all headquarters senior staff is now all going to be remote, and they can live anywhere in the country they want to. So lots of things to shake out from that regards. I do struggle with this as a residential. I do think there'll be opportunity. To Commissioner Gibbons' point, it may not be immediate, but if we build mid-rise residential on this, that's what it's going to be for the next 30, 40 years. And so the opportunity might not be today, but maybe in 10 years for something that's a little more of an iconic entryway to the city in this particular location. So I'm impressed with the presentation. Also realize that not everything will look the way it does on the screen there, but my concerns outweigh my positives at this point. So I would entertain a motion either way at this point to move us along on this process.
I'll make a motion to deny the applicant.
Motion to deny by Commissioner Horn, a second by Commissioner Gary. So if you're in favor of denying, you would vote yes on this item. Please vote. It's not accepting our input. Okay, our IT challenges continue. Now we've got the wrong names up. So we'll do a hand vote. If you're in favor of denial, please vote. If you're against or vote no on this item. So the item to deny carries 6-1. Thank you for your presentation. We still need to carry a vote on item 1B. I'm not sure there needs to be any additional discussion on it. Essentially, 1B is site plan for this, assuming that 1A was approved. So if there are any questions for staff or any comments on 1B, seeing none, I will accept a motion on that.
Make a motion that we take the staff recommendation to deny applicant 1B.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Horn, second by Commissioner Stone to deny item 1B. We're just going to skip. You want to try it? Nope, we're not going to try it. Okay, all those in favor of denying item 1B? That carries 7-0. Thank you.
Again, item 1A has two additional joining items. Would you like to present those together? 2A, I'm sorry. Item number 2A is a public hearing, zoning case 2021-005, request to rezone 6.8 acres from regional employment to commercial employment and request a specific use permit for new vehicle dealer on 5.0 acres located on the west side of Dallas North Tollway, 700 feet south of Spring Creek Parkway, zoned regional employment and located within the Dallas North Tollway Overlay District. Applicant is Park Place LX Land Company No. 1 Limited.
Good evening again, Commissioner Suzanne Bagley. The request to rezone this from regional employment to commercial employment and for a specific use permit for a new vehicle dealership located on the west side of the Dallas North Tollway. Next slide. The site is located on the west side Dallas North Tollway, 700 feet south of Spring Creek Parkway. It is currently vacant. The property to the north is another new car dealership. The property to the east is the Dallas North Tollway, and on the other side of the tollway is vacant land. To the south is also a new car dealership, and the west is also a new car dealership. Next slide, please. The site plan shows the layout of the boundary and configuration of the building, access driveways, and the parking of new vehicle and customer parking. Next slide. Conformance with the interim comprehensive plan. The zoning request was reviewed for that conformance with the interim comprehensive plan as adopted in August of 2020. The future land use plan shows the proposed use in a major corridor development. The list of categories in major corridor development is defined as expected to include a mix of commercial, office, and technical development. Although vehicle dealerships and locations are not directly referenced in the interim comprehensive plan, the use is considered of commercial use. Commercial uses permitted in the major corridor development. Therefore, the proposed vehicle dealerships should be considered in conformance with the interim comprehensive plan. Next slide. The proposed use is for regional employment to commercial employment and a specific use permit for a new vehicle dealership. The new dealership is relocating from an existing location on Plano Parkway. It's surrounded by new vehicle dealerships, and the small site can accommodate the proposed use. Next slide. There was one official reply in support of this development. Next slide. That one official support is shown on this slide. Go ahead to 1B. The 1B
2B.
is...
you mean 2B, right?
2B.
Thank you.
Yeah, 2B. The first slide shows the location. Next slide, please. And this again, this is 2B, which shows the site, as you saw in the previous presentation. It shows the building and the access lanes and the parking. There is, go ahead to 2C, please. Next slide. 2C is the whole area, which is the two dealerships that are adjacent, and the dealership that really wraps on the sides, and it's zoned for commercial insurance. Next slide. This shows both dealerships side by side, the parking and the buildings. There will be some overlap parking between the two. They're both owned by the same company, and the car wash will be shared. So, next slide. That's it. There again, the vacant property that's there right now. That concludes my report, and if you have any questions, Ms. Day and Mr. Hill and I'll be here to answer them. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. We need you to read the descriptions, please, for 2B and 2C.
Agenda item number 2B is a preliminary site plan, Precision Auto Edition, Block 1, Lot 1, new vehicle dealer on one lot on 5.4 acres located on the west side of Dallas North Tollway, 700 feet Spring Creek Parkway, zoned regional employment and commercial employment with specific use permit number 615 for new car dealer and located within the Dallas North Tollway Overlay District. Applicant again is Park Place XL Land Company number 1 Limited. Agenda item number 2C is a revised preliminary site plan. North 40 Dealership Edition, Block 1, Lot 1. New vehicle dealer on one lot on 27.3 acres located at the southwest corner of Dallas North Tollway and Spring Creek Parkway. Zone commercial employment with specific use permit number 615 for new car dealer and located within the Dallas North Tollway Overlay District. Again, applicant Park Place XL Land Company number 1 Limited.
Thank you. I think at this time we're going to give up on our electronics, so the rest of our votes will be by hand, just FYI. Okay. Let's go ahead and thank you for the staff reading already, but let's open the public hearing. Is the applicant here and would like to address the commission?
Yes, Mr. Greg James is online.
He's with our team, I think. Come
yes, I'm here.
After me, probably just with questions.
Okay, so Mr. James, do you have a presentation? Is there a presentation or anything?
Yes, we have one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Vice Chair, Commission, thank you for being here this evening. Brad Williams, 2728 North Harwood Street in Dallas. Next slide, please. So I know everyone is familiar with the property. I wanted to just add that in addition to the Lexus dealership and the Mercedes dealership that's on our side of the tollway, you also have classic BMW on the opposite corner. So really just want to kind of highlight there's one more dealership that's not shown here that is off screen, but sort of that's the predominant use of this intersection for the moment. Next slide, please. So before we get into the nuts and the bolts, I do want to tell you a little bit about the applicant, which is Asbury Automotive. They are one of the largest publicly traded auto retailers in the United States, now over 9 dealerships nationwide, including the Lexus dealership to the north. They have over 30 brands that they sell, focus on imports. This particular dealership will be a new Acura dealership. Next slide, please. Fairly simple request. It's currently zoned RE. We're asking for CE with the SUP for a new car dealer. As we've said, it's surrounded essentially on 3 sides by new car dealership at Tollway on the 4th. So it's the hole in the donut for CE and other new car dealerships. So we agree with staff that it's a compatible land use in the area. We think it's a natural fit with the unity of ownership. With the Lexus dealership, we can integrate these 2 dealerships very nicely. And it will harmonize the zoning in the area. So we think, and it conforms, and so we think it's an appropriate request. So here's the site plan. If you have any questions about it, I wasn't anticipating we were going to call these items together, but this site plan is simply just to establish a required site plan for this new property. The other site plan is to make conforming changes. We've adjusted the property line between the 2 properties slightly. We will do that at platting, so we're proposing to do that here. And on the existing dealership, off camera to the west, there's some greenfield that we're going to be putting parking on. So those are the main reasons for the site plan requests. Next slide, please. So this is actually kind of exciting for Acura. These are some images that are not very public yet. So this is one of the first opportunities that anyone has had a chance to see it. This is the new brand standard, and this is the dealership look that is proposed to go here. As you can see, it's very modern, very slick, and they're very proud of it. Next slide. Here's kind of a night shot, and you kind of see this LED banding on the front of the building. So we think that looks really cool, and they're very excited about it. Next slide, please. And in the interior, you can just kind of roll through these. The interior, again, very modern, very slick, especially very comfortable, luxurious, what you would expect from a brand like Acura. So I have we do have Craig James, who's the architect, online. If you have any questions for him, our civil, Jeff Dolane, is here as well if you have any technical questions about the site plans. Other than that, again, we agree with staff, and we would ask that you recommend us for approval, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff or the applicant? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Thank you.
And confine discussion to the commission. Sorry, I guess I should ask the question. I don't see anybody else in the room, and it doesn't say there's any more speakers on my sheet. But okay, thank
There
you.
aren't any more speakers.
I should have learned the first time around, ask, right? So thank you, Commissioner Horn. Very good. Any comments, questions? If not, I'll entertain the motion.
I recommend approval of item 2A.
Thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Stone, a second by Commissioner Samara. In favor of item 2A, please raise your hand. That item carries 7-0. Item 2B, which is the site plan. Are there any questions, comments? Motion for approval by Commissioner Gary. Do I have a second? Commissioner Walters. All in favor, raise your hand. That's carries 7-0. And finally, item 2C, which is the revised site plan.
Move approval as submitted, subject to City Council approval of the zoning case 2021-005 and Planning and Zoning Commission, which we did of the preliminary site plan.
Second.
So I have a motion by Commissioner Gibbons and a second by Commissioner Horn on item 2C. All those in favor, raise your hand, and that carries 7-0 as well. Item 3, please.
Item number 3, public hearing replat. East Spring Creek Venture Edition, Block A, Lot 1R. Restaurant on one lot on 0.9 acre located at the southeast corner of Spring Creek Parkway and Coit Road. Zoned retail. Applicant 100 Huevos de Racan, LLC.
Good evening, Commissioners. Donna Fletta, planner with the Planning Department. This item is recommended for approval as submitted. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff?
Yeah. What is this replacing something there at this point? What's on that corner? I had a hard time identifying that when I went up.
Yeah, I believe it's new construction. It's the Raising Cane's.
Okay. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Do we have any speakers?
We do not.
All right. Close that and I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval as submitted.
I have a motion by Commissioner Gibbons, second by Commissioner Stone. All those in favor, raise your hand. That carries 7-0. Item 4, please.
Non-public hearing items. The presiding officer will permit public comment for items on the agenda not posted for a public hearing. The presiding officer will establish time limits based upon the number of speaker requests, length of the agenda, and to ensure meeting efficiency, and may include a cumulative time limit. Speakers will be called in the order cards are received until the cumulative time is exhausted. Agenda item number 4 is a request to waive the 2-year waiting period. Urban Mixed Use 3. Request to waive the 2-year waiting period for consideration of a rezoning request for Urban Mixed Use 3 on 103.6 acres located on the east side of Alma Drive, 760 feet south of 15th Street. Zoned Urban Mixed Use 3. Applicant is MMCCM 48M LLC.
Good evening, Commission. Eric Hill, Senior Planning Manager. This is the request for the Collin Creek Mall property. A previous zoning request was approved in January of this year, and the applicant is requesting further modifications per the letter in your packet. The section 4.800 of the zoning ordinance allows for a waiver of the 2-year waiting period if it's determined by the commission that there are substantive reasons to permit the waiving time period. Reasons are included but not limited to those stated in your report. And at this time, it's recommended that a waiver of the 2-year waiting period be granted if the commission finds substantive reasons for the request. I'd be glad to answer any questions. I believe the applicant is also on the line.
Are there any questions for staff on this item? Any clarifications? Commissioner Stone.
Yes, Eric, do I understand that we're simply swapping open space from block Y to blocks J and L? Is that basically what we're doing?
There's going to be a proposal for change in open space and also some use changes.
Okay, are we going to have as much open space when we get done as we have today?
Yes, the proposal is to maintain the same amount of open
Good,
space.
thank you.
Mr. Hill, correct me if I'm wrong, but all we're doing is waiving the 2-year period tonight. We're not approving.
That's correct. This is not the zoning request. This is just to allow them to start the zoning process.
Right. Just to be clear. So all we're doing tonight is saying, yes, we'll give you some more time to make your requests. So any other questions for staff? It's not a public hearing. I know the applicant's on the line, but as I made clear, we're just giving them a little more time to submit their request. So is there any questions for the applicant? Anyone have a question for the applicant?
I mean, they were just here a couple of months ago. So I guess we need to ask the question, what's changed in 2 months that would necessitate this extension?
Well, I don't think it's something that's changed on their end as much as we have our time limits, correct? And now they're up against that. And so if they're going to make any additional request, we have to waive.
That's correct. So they are proposing to change the layout of the open space previously. So that requires a zoning amendment to do so. Since they had the previous zoning amendment approved in January, they have to request this waiver to the waiting period to address that issue.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying we approved what they requested in January.
Correct.
For us to approve what they're asking us to do, we have had to have a substantive change on error, correct? So I'm just asking, what is that substantive change? So we can agree to give them what they're asking for. Can the applicant answer that, or I mean,
is the applicant on the line?
We do. We have Prabha Sinclair.
Mr. Sinclair?
Evening.
Oh, good. Mrs. Sinclair, can you hear us?
This is Prabha Sinclair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So thank you, Eric. Yes, all we're doing is requesting a waiver tonight. And the substantive reason is that as we continue having discussions with the city, the Parks Department has requested us to evaluate where the open space, where would it be proper to place on the site. So we're going through those discussions right now, and we know that that needs an amendment to the zoning ordinance in order to allow that.
Thank you. So as was said, we're waiving that 2-year limit for change requests. The request would still have to come through here for approval or denial. I'm open to a motion.
move approval to waive the 2-year waiting period as requested.
I have a motion by Commissioner Gibbons and a second by Commissioner Samara to waive the 2-year waiting period as suggested in item 4. All in favor, raise your hand. That's 7-0. Thank you. Item 5.
Agenda item 5 is a review period extension request, preliminary plat, Plano Business Park, Phase 2, Block 1, Lot 8. Office, showroom, warehouse, and restaurant on one lot on 6.4 acres located at the southwest corner of Plano Parkway and Los Rios Boulevard. Zoned Research Technology Center. Applicant is IMAD Incorporated.
It's recommended that the commission grant the applicant's request for the 30-day extension of the preliminary plat review period.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item for staff? This is not a public hearing. Is there anyone speaking on this issue?
No, there is not.
Thank you. I'll confine discussion to commissioners. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion that we grant the applicant's request for a 30-day extension.
Thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Horn, a second by Commissioner Walter. All those in favor, raise your hand. That item carries 7-0. I think the last item is items for future discussion. Do I have any items that the commissioner would like to bring forward? Commissioner Horn.
The last meeting, the chairman requested the status of the
CPR.
The CPR review. Is that going to be occurring in the next meeting?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, that's
Yes.
just one general reminder.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
being said, I'm excited to be studying finance at UT Austin, hook 'em horns, and I'm sure the experiences I was given through the Plano Mayor's internship will serve me well in this next chapter of my life. Needless to say, 2020 was an unbelievable year for students. I don't think I ever could have guessed that my bedroom here would double as my classroom as well. As